It's that time of year again where we do our annual look at all the Trachycarpus palm trees, every species that you can possibly grow here in my garden that have been planted out, can you believe it, for 10 years now. So have they grown big or have they hardly moved at all since last year and since the first year? Join me as we look around the garden and look at all these wonderful palm trees. Here we are with the Trachycarpus wagnerianus, which has grown quite a lot this year actually. If we go from the ground all the way up, you can still see all the nice green leaves from the base right to the top. And it's a good steady grower, pushing out 4 or 5 good leaves every year, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. And this has been a decent year for the Trachycarpus wagnerianus. You can see behind it a lot of ivy on the fence now, and that is encroaching into some of the palm trees, which we'll see. A little bit on the waggy, but a bit more on some of the others. So that's the wagnerianus, which is standing at over 2 meters tall now, here at the end of 2024. Next, with the Trachycarpus martianus Nepaliform. Good solid trunk on this now after 10 years of growth. A few years it's been completely defoliated with the cold weather. We've had minus 4.7 so far this year. As you can see, still got its leaves because I had a blanket thrown over it for a couple of nights when it was very cold and snowy. So this is recovering. It was completely defoliated last year and the year before, but I didn't give it as much protection in those years. So this year I'm trying to protect it a bit better. And it has grown. It's got 3.5 new leaves this year. So it is well on the way to recovery. It's not the fastest growing palm in the garden, but it is surviving 10 years in my Yorkshire garden for Trachycarpus martianus. Next up, we have Trachycarpus tachyle, the true form. Very slender trunk on this one. And the leaves are quite elegant and long as well. And it's not grown to a great height, comparing it to the martianus next to it. It is not as big. If we just go and look in the centre, you can see quite long ligules here. And nice healthy green leaves, all arching this way. So quite a graceful palm, but so far, very slow growing really. And next up, in complete contrast, we have the fastest growing Trachycarpus by far, which is not the true species. This is Trachycarpus princeps hybrid. It's been flowering for the last 2 or 3 years. And then let's look up at this trunk. Before we get to the foliage, you can see the old flowers there, where it's trying to set seed. And look at that, huge chunk on that, nice and orange tomentum, the top half. And if we just pan out a bit, we can see that. And then the foliage at the top, nice big green leaves, basically no whitish silverish underneath like it was when it's smaller, and very different to the true princeps, which is much more bluey silver underneath. But a monster of a palm, which is well over 3 meters tall now, and that trunk is well over 2 meters tall now after 10 years. So that's done well. Fastest growing palm, definitely the best for the garden, if like a big, strong growing palm tree. Next is a palm tree that was planted as ulcrahensis. Almost certainly isn't. You can see off of the base leaves here. You see some scrappy summer foliage plants that have been caught by the frost, but you can see there nice healthy ligules there and nice healthy leaves. I will stand back and show this in greater detail. So here we are stepping back. You can see the leaves beyond the foliage there. You can see that compared to the princeps hybrid next door. Next we have Trachycarpus nanital, which was very often missold about 10 years back as Tequil or Nova or something else. This is a nice robust, fast growing palm tree. Nice strong growth on this one. Nice straight trunk without any creep on it. Not as much tomentum. You can see the top there, see the ligules, petioles, looking good. That's grown to about 2 meters and a bit tall now. So it's a nice healthy palm tree. And then next to that, we have the true Princeps. So look at the silvery leaves on that. Beautiful bluish silvery undersides and apple green on the upper sides to dark green on the older leaves there. That is again a very slow growing palm, 10 years in the ground. We've got a tiny trunk down there, but nothing really to write home about. And this has grown, well, not too many leaves this year, about 3 good solid leaves, so pretty slow year for the Trachycarpus princeps in this location. And in total height, we're looking at about 1 meter from ground to the top of the leaves, so still quite a small palm tree after all these years, but not as small as a palm tree growing next to it, which we'll have a look at now. So this little fella is Trachycarpus Gemini sectus. Stiff leaves, extremely slow growing. This is only, what, 20-30 centimeters off the ground, so very tiny plant. Underneath, you've got a bit of glaucousness, so it is silverish green underneath, and it's nicely solid in the ground there. But we've only got, what, 2.5 leaves this year, which is pretty average for this plant. 3 leaves is the most it really ever gets. And again, 10 years, and you've got basically hardly any growth. Lots of leaves, they are small leaves in this plant. And again, we'll contrast that to the next plant, which is Trachycarpus fortunei, which is a standard one you find in all garden centres. This is a true species of fortunei, it's not a cross. And this actually has not been a super fast specimen, because it is competing obviously with all the other plants in this area. But all these palm trees are south facing. You can see the trunk on that. And then we'll pan up. We've got those standard leaves, a bit raggedy in places. But that is Trachycarpus fortunei. And now we've got to this size where the trunk's about 60-70 centimeters tall, nice and stocky. It should start, really motoring over the next 5-10 years to be a nice tall plant. So this is Trachycarpus fortunei. I'll step back in a second so you can see the full size of it. So there we are, that's a fortunei. You can see the nice leaves on this one. I'll just pan around, you can see, we can't see Gemini sectus, it's so small, but you can see the princeps there. And up there, we can see the nanital. And beyond that, we've got the princeps hybrid. But now we go from this very common garden palm tree, the fortunei, to something a little rarer, and that is latisectus. So one of the more tender ones. We'll come round and have a look at that. And we'll look down because it's a smaller plant. But the leaves are quite different. They're very thin as well. So you've got the thick leaves of the fortunei here. And you've got the very, very thin leaves of the latisectus, but they're nice and round here, not segmented as much. You can see leaves. This got defoliated last year, so it's recovered, and it's been outcompeted a little bit by this hydrangea. So it needs to sort of sort this out, tidy this area up. But it's got a nice solid spear in there, so that's fine. Again, that's about 1 meter tall now, and that's grown about 2 leaves this year, so been pretty slow. Now then, next to that, we've got the smallest in the genus, and that is down here. There we go, we'll go into that. That is Nanus, which mainly has its trunk underground or at ground level, doesn't really get tall. Often its native habitat gets eaten by goats, and it's quite endangered now. and it's grown a couple of leaves this year, and it's getting a bit bigger. I mean, that's a decent sized leaf for an anise now. So I had two good leaves in this one, maybe three. Long petioles, and you can't really see a trunk on that. It's right down at ground level. Again, that's 10 years growth. Put my foot by the side of it, you can see it's not much bigger than my foot. It's only about 30 centimeters tall, something like that. So that's all the Trachycarpus species in this area. So now it's time to look at some of the others further around the garden. So this is Trachycarpus nova, one of the fastest growing palm trees you can buy. Doesn't do well in exposed spots because the leaves do get shredded a little bit, but it's fast growing. And in my garden, it's a pretty stocky palm tree. It's got a nice, thick, hairy trunk on it. It's flowered again for the last few years. Planted as a very small plant, and it's done very well. Again this year, lots of new leaves up there. And as you can see up there, the leaves are very large, but the wind does break them a little bit, so it's not as neat and tidy as a wagon. Now for a different type of Trachycarpus, this is Trachycarpus commune. Quite a nice stocky trunk on this one, but slow growing, although it is in a more sheltered location here. This is not the same as Trachyl and Lanital. It is a different type found in the Cologne region, and it has beautiful leaves. So let's just stand back and admire this palm tree. We can see this one. It's one of my favourite looking Trachycarpus. Not super fast growing, but beautiful leaves in this one. Really elegant. You don't see it very often, but it's well worth hunting out. But it's a beautiful, beautiful palm tree, standing at over 2 meters tall now in my garden. And finally, we end with the rarest Trachycarpus species, Trachycarpus aureophilus, with its tall, slender trunk. Actually, very fast growing. From a small plant to one that's actually the tallest out of all of them. So potentially the fastest growing Trachycarpus. And it flowered for the first time this year. You can see the spent flowers here. Unfortunately, it was a male, not a female, so no seeds for me. Hopefully others will have had female plants, and we should get some pure aureophilus seeds next year available, and hopefully onto the market for people to grow this wonderful plant. And we'll just look up. We can see those apple green concertina-like leaves. Very long petioles on this one. Beautiful, beautiful leaves. White, unlike other Trachycarpus. One of my favourite for certain. And this is Trachycarpus aureophilus. Not super hardy, but it's grown 10 years plus in Yorkshire, so it's not that bad at all. And we shouldn't forget about this palm tree, which is a true Trachycarpus ulcahensis, but as you can see, it's covered in tetrapanax leaves and phoenix leaves, but under there, trust me, there is ulcahensis, and it's got some decent growth on it this year. It's turned into a nice little palm tree. So hopefully, over the next few years, this will become quite statuesque in my front garden, and hopefully outcompete the Phoenix canariensis, which isn't too far behind it. So that's a quick look at the ulcahensis in the front garden. Now these are all Trachycarpus palm trees in my garden. I've got many more multiples and hybrids, some growing much bigger than the ones shown in this video, and I will do a tour of some of my best specimens in an upcoming video. But have you enjoyed this video? If you so, please give a thumbs up and a like and a comment below, and let me know which is your favourite type of Trachycarpus that you grow in your garden and that I grow in my garden. Thank you for watching this edition of Exotic Gardening UK. Join me next week, we'll be doing more in the garden.